In this video we'll take a look at the while loop for C# using Visual Studio 2010. To begin with, I'll create a new project. And I'm going to go ahead and name this project while loop. I'm going to go ahead and begin this. And I'll go ahead and begin this by creating or placing two objects on my form. The first one is going to be a button. And now I'm going to also use what's called a list box to list the items that we're going to have. So I'll move both of those items over to my text or my form, and I'm going to go ahead and give my button a name. I'm going to go ahead and call that CMD, and I'll use run this time. And I'll go ahead and change the text of my button to say run. And then for my list box, I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit larger to display some of the characters here we're going to use to run. There we go. And I'll go ahead and give my list box a name as well. I'll call it LST output. Go ahead and hit enter. And now let's go ahead and write some code here for our loop. We can center that. I'll double click on the run button. And now we're going to go ahead and write code for the CMD run click event. To begin with, we're going to go ahead and create a variable which is called a loop control variable that's going to be used to actually be tested for our condition of our loop. That way when the condition is no longer met, our loop will stop. So I'll just create a quick one called integer, and I'll call it counter. I'll set it equal to 1, semicolon there. And so we're going to go ahead and use that as our condition to test whether or not we should run our loop. I'll type in the while command, and then I'm going to go ahead and open up my parenthesis. In the parentheses here, we're going to go ahead and put in the condition that needs to be true in order for my loop to run. So I'll just say while counter is less than 10. And I'll go ahead and end this while loop, and now I'll need to use the opening and closing curly braces to actually be used, and this is going to be where our code is for a while loop. So we'll go ahead and start by adding items to our list box that we have on our form. So I'll just say lst output dot items dot add, and then in parentheses here we'll just go ahead and put counter, and I'll end that with a semicolon. And now if I run this code, my loop will run continuously. The reason being is because we haven't manipulated that counter or that variable that we're going to use to control our loop. So what I need to do here is I'm going to go ahead and add, or I'm going to tell counter to just go ahead and let it be equal to itself plus 1, which means it's going to add 1 to it. Now this can be written several different ways. You can write it counter plus plus or plus plus counter. And so there are a couple different ways to write that. I'm just going to use this simple basic way to show you that we're going to add it itself and add 1 to it, or increment it by 1. And now we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and test our program by running it. So now if I hit run, you'll see that it adds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And notice it didn't add 10. So I'm going to go ahead and close this box here. And the reason why it didn't add 10 is because while counter is going to be less than 10, this is going to run, which means when counter equals 9 and it runs through here, the time of 9 is going to add 1 to it, and it's going to come back and check the loop and say 10 is no longer less than 10, and so it won't run and it won't display itself right here while it is equal to 10. And so this is going to loop, and basically what it does is when our code runs, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to create this integer for us, set it equal to 1. It's going to test this counter that we've got, this counter integer that we've got, to see if it's true, and if this value is true, it'll run what I have here between my curly braces. And so it'll run through. When it reaches the end of my curly brace, the program will come back up and do another check on the while to see if the condition still exists, and if it's true, it'll run through my loop again over and over and over again until this condition is no longer met, which in this case is when it equals 10. In this case, because we're incrementing by 1, the condition is false, and then my loop will end. And this concludes the use of the while loop within C#.